Hello and welcome back to the channel. Thank you for joining me in another of my wonderful interviews. Now today we're going to challenge your perception of history. We're going to challenge what you think has happened in this world because my guest today has some fascinating information. You may, I think, might find it hard to accept, but we'll go with it because we're very open-minded on this channel, and we'll ask the relevant questions if I can think of them. You may remember I had a very lovely, interesting gentleman who came on the show to tell us about the Tartarian Empire about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks ago now. There was a lot of interest in that. And funnily enough, a video suddenly was released by, I think, a guy called Stu Peters, if I've got that right. And it was all about the previous history using airships and ether from big towers and these wonderful Palladian, Georgian-style buildings that had a lot of the buildings underground, about mud floods and all of this. And it was a fascinating documentary put together, which really challenges your version of history that we've been told. And of course, none of us were actually there because we're only of a certain age. However, evidence is out there, and Guy Anderson, my guest, has been doing a lot of research and is writing a book called Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids. And he joins me now. Guy, welcome back to the show. It's lovely to have you back again. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, Richard. Thank you for having me back. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very interested to know what the feedback was or how you felt it went from our last time. There was a lot of people who were sort of really on board with what you were saying and going, blimey, at last, Richard's got somebody who's got some fascinating information that's not seen the light of day for a while. And others, a little bit skeptical. How did you find it?
Well, actually, a few people said to me, whatever you do, don't read the comments. So,
Yes.
but I mistakenly read a couple of them, and I saw that some people were saying, finally, at last, people are talking about this.
Yes.
And some people were saying, this man's talking gibberish. A couple commented on the fact that we may possibly be twins.
Oh, I didn't say that. Well, there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us bald glasses wearing people around.
Yeah, I
So,
think it's perhaps a sign of age more than anything else.
absolutely, it's probably the radiation that makes the hair fall out.
Yeah. But one
So,
thing that did happen was from the moment we did that interview, the
mm.
Facebook page for the book I'm writing just exploded,
Oh,
absolutely exploded.
and did you get more information and other hints and tips and leads and
Yeah,
things? Yeah.
yeah, and a lot of personal stories. People actually, specifically about the Cabbage Patch Kids part of the book. So many stories that have been passed down from great grandparents, and a lot of information on other areas as well, and lots of links. And yeah, it's been fantastic. The page actually needs someone permanently managing it. It's just exploded, and that's thanks to you and the popularity of what you're doing and your podcast.
Well, I know that not everybody agrees with the things that I say or even my guests say, but we do like to have a plethora of guests who have different opinions and different ideas. And the
Mm,
whole point is really to be open-minded and that the
yes,
viewer can make their own mind up and pursue it. Now, I know that your book, Tesla and the Cabbage Patch Kids, is still work in progress, is yet to be
yes,
published. And as soon as you've got it, and you very kindly said you'd send me a copy, and I will read it, and then we'll get you back on, and it'll be a fantastic conversation, I'm sure, because I shall have more information and more
yeah.
questions. We're going to go into an interesting area, which I think may well challenge a lot of people. And that is after the reset of 1776. Now, I remember you telling me in the previous episode that there was this Tartarian Empire that stretched across, I think you were saying, in Russia and the Mongols and all of that sort of thing. But it crossed into Europe and even in America, and it was almost a global phenomenon. And then all of a sudden, it disappears, and it's almost as if the evidence has been desperately hidden. Although, of course, there are, if you know where to look and you know what to look for, it's there. And one of the interesting things was these Cabbage Patch Kids, the idea that there were hundreds, if not thousands, possibly millions of kids that we see in those postcards that You only have to put that into a search engine now, and you see
Yeah.
these very macabre postcards showing lots of orphaned children available to purchase
Yes.
or to adopt. So we're going to talk about that, and also you make a very interesting point just before we came on air, as it were, to record this. What happened to all the adults? So let's just recap a little bit, and then for those people who didn't see it, and I'll put a link to the in the description for our previous interview. So the Tartarian Empire, whether you believe it or didn't believe or don't believe it, comes to an end in 1776. What happens?
Well, it appears that the Tartarians were now the dominant empire across the Northern Hemisphere, but also they had influences and control in places like Australia and South America. And that's why you see very similar buildings in a lot of these places. So if you just took it, for example, Australia, you'll see buildings there that are in that Greco-Roman style, yet they claim that the settlers built them, which would suggest that a very small amount of perhaps skilled people, along with an incredible amount of convicts, had incredible stonemasonry and architectural skills, which of course is unlikely. And again,
Mm.
all of these buildings share the same floor, and that being that the bottom windows are normally half sunk into the ground in what is now a basement, and that stems from what they call the mud flood. So it seems that what happened just after 1776, we had earthquakes, fires, and floods. And if you do research into the town or city where you live, you will find that between 1776 and the early 1800s, there will have been a fire or a flood where you live.
Yes.
And that will be the explanation to why a lot of these windows are submerged, semi submerged into the ground. And they call them mud flood windows. So it looks like sorry, Richard.
No, I was only going to say. I mean, these. I guess the the earthquakes created a flood of mud that buried buildings. Is that where the mud floods come from?
Yeah, but also a lot of fire, and by getting up to a certain temperature, and in some cases it was actually frozen. Technically ice and snow from the top of mountains. All of this was traveling through heat at incredible speed and put up to 20-25 feet over everything in its path. And just coincidentally, they managed to happen in every major city and town in the world. And it looks like the comet of 1811, which was one of the catalysts for all of this, perhaps wasn't a comet. And some people say it was an early direct energy weapon. I've got no evidence of that at all. But there is a famous French artist that actually drew the comet of 1811. And what he drew was a mushroom cloud.
Oh, right.
Very
Wow.
clearly, you can Google it. You can go onto Google Images. Not that I like Google, but it's what most people are going to be using that watch this.
Mm.
Type in the comet of 1811, and you will see paintings and postcards showing you a mushroom cloud hit. And they say approximately 100 of these hit or broke up. The comet broke up into about 100 pieces and hit um, every major city in the Northern Hemisphere. But
So,
everywhere else, there were floods and fires.
right. And
Yeah.
so now, before we move on, because this is going to challenge a lot of people's perception of what they understand history was, because we've heard of things
Mm,
like the Normans and Norman castles, and then we go
mm,
into the Plantagenets in
mm,
England, and the Tudors, the
mm,
Stuarts, and the Georgians as a line of kings and things. And we have Shakespeare, who may or may not have been Shakespeare, and we have people living in Elizabethan houses, and then some people who have money living in Georgian houses, and then we get up to 1776, which is the Georgian period, and yet, so what we understand as being the history, and when you go to places like, I don't know, somewhere like Shrewsbury in Shropshire, you'll see Georgian houses, you'll still see timber framed houses. It does sound as if these are two completely different types of worlds that we're describing. One with these massive, great big buildings and airships and free energy from the ether from towers and things, and then keep bashing the microphone. And then this world that we see the remnants of, the timber framed houses and thatched cottages and elliptic limestone in farmer sticks. So how do you equate those two, because they seem to be at odds with each other?
I think that they're two different periods of time. We don't know how old a lot of these buildings that they claim are Tartarian. We don't know how old they are, because what you'll find is if you go to perhaps the oldest building you can find that's stone built, one with pillars, the Greco-Roman style, often they won't tell you when they were built. They will tell you when they were founded or when they were established, but very rarely when they were actually built. So I think the Tartarian Empire was what was around. I mean, it goes all the way back to, Genghis Khan and further.
Right.
But the style of building and the technology and the airships, which people state, as far as they're concerned, was part of the Tartarian Empire and their technology, wasn't that they were the ruling class. And in America, it wasn't really the Tartarians. They were actually a group of people called the Moors, which were black nobility. So in America, we would be talking about the Tartarian influenced Moors. So it was almost a way of life, almost an era and a style. They were very dapper. Most of them wore hats, top hats. They even got dressed up and wore hats on the beach. Even the children wore hats. It was very much as you see the Victorians, perhaps more middle class and upper class Victorians. That was typically in the Northern Hemisphere what the Tartarians looked like and how they would appear. But in America, the Tartarian technology and the Tartarian buildings and culture was shared by the Moors. So you would say that the Moors in America fell under the umbrella of the Tartarians. So they're building the blueprints for building and technology, and these airships, for example, that was all part of the same empire, but it was divided into, if you like, subsections, where there are lots of different groups of people within it.
But I suppose what I'm trying to get at is where, if you look at the costume, for example, from the Tudor period, they're all wearing long drapey costumes, furs, all that kind of stuff, and then somehow, then you've got this period after that, the Stuart period and the Georgians, and yet there is this sort of huge change.
Yes.
But we don't read about that in history. We just see this sort of gentle progression to clothes changing, buildings becoming more substantial. The architectural people will say, well, you had timber frame buildings, and then the stone buildings of people who had a lot of money. The manor houses with the was squat and were often moated, and
yes,
and they built up their crenellated properties and what have you. So how do you get then? What happened between the sort of Tudor times and the Stuarts and the Queen Anne type buildings to suddenly here we are in this Tartarian world in which we have this Greco-Roman suddenly popping up? It doesn't sound. Yeah, sorry.
I don't think anything specific happened. I think that it was just a natural progression. I don't think it was a different group of people that were building the Tudor houses to the Greco-Roman style, which obviously places like Bath. I don't think that there was anybody in particular that suddenly came over and said, from now on, we're going to wear this and we're going to build this way. I think it was just a progression, but it was heavily influenced by the Tartarian Empire. And as they traveled, as it expanded, into, because it originated, it was more originally, Great Tartaria covered Russia and most of Asia. It then slowly went into Eastern Europe, Western Europe, into Britain, I call it Britain and not the United Kingdom because I
Yeah.
don't see we're united in any way, and then spread over to America. But the nobility in America were the Moors, so they now fell under the umbrella of the Tartarians. And the problem with all of this is, with all the great book burnings like Alexandria and, a lot of books that were burnt in the Second World War, a lot of this information is either inaccessible or it's been destroyed. So it's very difficult to get to the nuts and bolts of anything that happened from that
Now
period of time.
I know I emailed you because it dawned, because I did a video about
Mm,
everyone should keep a diary, and they should,
yeah.
a handwritten diary, because in this digital world it's very easy to sort of delete people's vlogs,
Mm,
blogs, online, Substacks and things like that. Whereas if you are doing handwritten diary and letters and correspondence, of which we've got in the archive up and down well, across the world, huge amounts of letters going forward, during
mm,
the Neapolitan, I can't even say it now, Napoleonic Wars, and
yeah.
all sorts of different times. You've got, and
Mm.
people are writing books based on these hand delivered letters that the service was back in then. Why is it, if we've got all of that, that we don't see these letters, these books, these business accounts, all the sort of paperwork
Mm.
that we would have done from a Tartarian point of view, talking about, big buildings suddenly being built and
Mm.
constructed, or I went to so and so, or there were these mud floods, or whatever. Why is it that there is no evidence of it in terms of letters and correspondence, which would be hard to see that there shouldn't be?
I haven't found any correspondence at all, but then I haven't specifically gone out there to search for that. What I have
Mm.
done is I've gone out and looked for old books, old publications, and I've come across quite a few, and I've actually bought some. Even today, actually, I saw one in an old bookshop here, and Tartaria and the Tartars are referred to in anything you can find that's older than really the mid 1800s. It's there in black and white. A lot of people will go onto the page and say Tartaria never existed. Well, you've still got the Gulf of Tartary between Russia and China. That's still there. So if it never existed, I don't know why they would have named an expanse of water after them. But you need to find old books. And I
Mm.
think what you'll find is if you were trying to find any information on them without really digging, then you'll come across the same hurdles I did initially, and that is everything was destroyed in fires. And they've wanted to wipe out this race of people.
And
And
when you said they, who do you mean?
it's the same old faces. It is the bloodline of the most powerful people in the world. The Council of 13, the Club of Rome. People will call them the Illuminati. It's the Rothschilds and co. And obviously, Rothschilds go all the way back to Amun Ra, the pharaoh, who, after the second war he'd created, he said he would leave everything to the Ra Khan, and which translates to the Ra Childs, and slowly became the Rothschilds. And he would leave them the power and control of the planet. And nothing's changed. You have 13 families that run and own everything. So you might think when you vote on the 4th of July, which is a strange day to pick
Mm.
for an election, isn't it? But again, with regard to that as a side issue, left or right, they're two wings of the same bird. The bird itself is controlled by these families, as is the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, the Trilateral Commission, UNICEF, NATO, behind them all, and behind the people that poison us and then provide us with the cure. It's the same companies and the same people. So often people will say his history actually refers to his story.
Mm.
And it is always written by the victors. And it is always the same faces. You'll see Rothschild appear more than any of the other families. There are others, DuPont, Kennedy, to name but a few. But it's always the Rothschilds at the helm. And they have wiped everything off the face of the earth because the huge emphasis behind the Tartarian Empire was free energy.
Right.
Now,
And
that
and
doesn't
they
make
don't.
money.
It doesn't make but prior to that, if they were in control, they why did they allow that free energy to exist?
I think they've battled with them for a very long time, and I think they come and go. And for
Right.
example, you could argue now, why are they allowing me and you to have this conversation?
Mm.
The stuff is out there, and I don't think they can necessarily influence everything, and they can't stop things from happening, but they can certainly get involved and meddle. And I think that these resets are planned. I don't think that it's happening now by coincidence. A lot of people don't believe we're going through one now, but it does say it on the World Economic Forum's website.
Yes,
Welcome
we
to New World Order, and the Great
the Great
Reset.
Reset.
Yeah,
Yes.
so this is something that's planned over vast periods of time. I think it probably goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years, and they follow a very specific plan. And it appears to be every 250 years when we get to a point where we are taking a little bit too much control and are a little bit too independent and maybe have too much access to free energy or free anything, they get rid of us. But at the time that they got rid of the free energy, there wasn't anything else in its place. They needed the gas and oil to take off, and the internal combustion engine and coal-fired power stations, and that had to happen before they could wipe out free energy. If they had have wiped out the Tartarian free energy before they had that in place, then you'd have no infrastructure. But also, I do believe that this is planned.
Right.
And they're very, very patient, and this is going back thousands of years. Their
Yeah.
ancestors doing this every so often.
So let's go to 1776 then, and there's all these mud
Mm,
floods. A lot of buildings are buried, and all the historical evidence has disappeared.
mm,
Some buildings clearly remain. I was in Blackpool a couple of weeks ago, and
yes.
I was looking at Blackpool famous tower. And
Mm,
in my mind, I was thinking, having seen that documentary with the airships, I was thinking,
hmm.
okay. And I did actually, in the talk that I gave, I said it's nice to be in Blackpool and look at the Blackpool Tower and imagine the airship tethered to
Mm,
it and the free energy being taken from the ether. And because the audience just looked at me blankly as if I was some
yeah.
loony. But I mentioned it in case somebody sort of smiled at me or nodded to go, oh, you know your stuff, sort of thing.
Mm,
So some buildings did exist. They obviously didn't get rid of all of them, and so we
no.
see these buildings across the world that have the same thing. But moving away from that, let's get on to the kids because
Mm,
it seems they got rid of all the adults. I mean, there must have been
yeah.
some adults left. So
Mm.
just to talk us through that business about they got rid of the adults, and then we're left with children who presumably had to survive.
Yeah. So obviously, the Napoleonic War, for example, and the civil wars that took place destroyed a lot of a lot of soldiers, ultimately a lot of
Mm.
men. The fires and floods. Then we had famine, such as the potato famine in Ireland. We had a lot of famine and a lot of outbreaks and things like cholera, the outbreak of cholera, and so on. So I think what happened from the research I've done is you were left with either children that had no parents, that genuinely were orphans, and at that time they were called urchins, street Arabs, mudlarks, ragamuffins, um, in their thousands and thousands of orphaned, genuinely homeless orphaned children that were
From
abandoned.
all ages, presumably.
Yeah, absolutely. And but at the same time, they brought out the Lunacy Act. Now, I don't have the exact year, but I'm pretty sure it was around 1776 again that the Lunacy Act is introduced. And there are a number of reasons that you could be committed to an asylum. The asylums didn't exist in any real significant way until 1776 as well. So all of a sudden, from that period of time, you've got prisons open, orphanages open, and asylums open, all overnight in the most incredible buildings. These are the Greco-Roman
Mm.
buildings with pillars out of the front and often stained glass windows, huge bell towers, and inside we're talking marble and granite, the most incredible detail and architectural um, extravagance, really, not just with the building, but also with the grounds as well, and huge grounds. So
Yes.
all of a sudden, these things popped up overnight. And again, most of them will say they were founded, which in conspiracy world, we would say found dead,
Ah,
uninhabited.
interesting. Yes.
The people had gone, they'd been killed. And so a lot of these buildings that they claim were an asylum or built specifically to be a prison or an orphanage, they're incredible. These are magnificent.
Hmm.
Um, so all of a sudden, there are no adults around, and the ones that are left are committed to prison if they won't comply. They won't change to the new way of doing things after the reset. And the Lunacy Act meant that even being a single female parent, a mum on her own who's lost her husband in a civil war, would instantly have her children taken away because you were considered insane if you were a single parent. You were considered insane if you read too much, if you had women's problems, is another one. Over religious.
If you had women's problems, that would be all women, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. So anything they could do to get your children away from you and at the
Hmm.
same time get you off the street. Because if you were still talking about where's the free energy gone, what happened to the Tartarian Empire, you had to get out of the way. And they would try and re educate these people and recondition them. And if they couldn't do that, then you stayed locked away. So we're left with an abundance of children, orphans, homeless children.
Right. Who know nothing and can be easily taught a history,
Mm,
which may or may not be true.
absolutely, and they were shipped all over the world.
Now, you
Um,
mentioned before we recorded, another thing you mentioned as we were sort of talking in our preamble is that there was such an abundance of children. Where did they all come from? And there was the
mm,
suggestion that maybe, and I know you said you didn't have any evidence for this, that they were cloning.
yeah, but a lot of people are talking about that on my Facebook page. Now, this is something that if you go back to the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Emerald Tablets and the Anunnaki, that they made the first man. I think it was Adapo, after trial and error, and then made an incredible number of them. Now, that is what they say happened back then. This is too long ago for anybody to be able
Mm.
to substantiate. But I'm sure if you got into the vaults of the Vatican, you'd be able to find out whether that was true or not. But certainly, from what, if you could read the Bible between the lines, Genesis is explaining that they made the first person, and and that's also a story that's shared in every culture, that these people came and made us. They took Neanderthal man, hence the missing link, dabbled with their DNA and got us to obey. And here we are
Yeah,
now, to obey.
to obey.
Yeah.
So this is why we see these postcards of the children, of
Mm,
which, very weird compared to what
yeah.
we think, because normally we would have a very nurturing attitude to children. You wouldn't have them in great long lines, certainly not
Mm,
depicted in cabbages, but you do see them on the shelves, and as if they are goods to be sold.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that whole um that whole sort of cabbage patch style, if you like. And the reason they're in cabbages is because that's an old Russian
Mm.
folklore that says that baby boys, were found in amongst cabbage patches, and baby girls were found in amongst roses. And
Right.
it's old Russian Slavic folklore. But also that sort of spanned across the world as well. It spread out across Europe. Now, some of these postcards that you're referring to, and one of the main publishers of these postcards is a company called Rex, and they started in Germany and then became popular in France and then spread across the world. Now, some of them actually state repopulation.
Do they?
That you can Google them. Yeah, so they're not necessarily. just pictures with babies in amongst cabbages. And
Yes.
incidentally, there's the first female writer, actress, and director is a lady called Alice Guy, French, and she brought out a couple of films. One in I think it was 1896. And I'm just referring to my notes here because I'm still writing. Alice Guy, 1896. Yes, wrote, starred, directed, and produced the first narrated silent movie, and that's called The Cabbage Patch Fairy.
Hmm.
So that's where this whole cabbage thing comes from. She says that it was she was inspired by Russian folklore. And then just after the movie, all of these postcards come around, sort of around the 1920s. This company, Rex, it started in Germany, as I said, and then went to France, very popular in France. She was inspired by that to produce a film. So these repopulation postcards, as they're now called, a lot of them feature either babies being sold or being found in amongst cabbage patches, or actually machines where they're putting in cabbage seeds at the top and rose seeds at the top of the machine, and the babies are popping out of the bottom, a bit like a massive Magimix or food blender. That they're dropping out of the bottom, and they are
Right.
called repopulation postcards. So if anybody wants to search again on the internet,
Yeah.
they'll see this, and also what they'll find, and this makes pretty grim viewing, is a lot of them actually advertise the children as being for sale.
I'm just going to do another quick search. Let's put Rex Cabbage Patch and see what comes up on images. It's just getting all the dolls from.
Yeah.
You need to go beyond that somehow.
Yeah, so if you type in repopulation postcards, you'll see what we're talking about there.
So we'll do that as we go and see what happens on the. Oh yeah! Oh my goodness! Let me see if I can bring that across onto the screen here. I need to just be able to see what I'm
That's
doing.
funny. If you look at the top in the middle where it's giving you for sale, you see Alice Guy has come up. Oh, sorry. If you go back, yeah, sorry, along a couple. So if you go along three more, no, it's above that. Sorry, Richard, above
Oh, here.
those.
Oh, yes,
Alice
here.
Guy. Yeah. So Alice Guy, the famous French actress and director. That's her there, and you can still find those videos on YouTube. They disappeared for a while, but yes. So you see from those images that you were just looking at. There you go. There's a classic example there.
The cabbage catch babies. Let's just open that up. We did look at that.
Repopulation postcards.
The first movie ever made. It says.
Yeah, yeah. And some of her movies that she made afterwards are quite dark. It's actually not a very pleasant film to watch. If you watch her first one, where in that what happens is a couple turn up at the farm, go to the counter or the stall to buy a baby, and there she is, and she picks one up by its arm or leg. You can see that the baby's clearly in distress, and this new couple on their honeymoon walk away with a brand new baby. Now, some of these repopulation postcards actually have little statements underneath some of the babies on the front, and they say things like, "I promise I'll be good. I promise I'll love you. I won't cry. I won't wet the bed." And some of them say, "For sale, no refunds." You can believe that.
That is amazing.
Mm.
So, and then there's various sort of rehash versions of it. So, I mean, okay, let's just let me just drop this out of the way for a second and go back to the pair of us. If there were all these kids and they got rid of the adults, how are the kids surviving? Who's farming food? Who's making buildings and houses and dealing with the everyday sort of thing of
Well,
life.
there's still quite a lot of the population around. They didn't wipe
Right.
everybody out. Um, and this is where the Freemasons come into play. So when the children were moved around and shipped around en masse, it was normally the standard practice to have them assembled outside of a Masonic lodge. And that is where the bidding would start. So the older children, because the Cabbage Patch Babies comes under repopulation, and some people would say that was cloning because they'd
Mm.
wiped out all of these people that wouldn't comply, the Tartarian Empire, and lots of other groups of people that just would not swallow the you know the new narrative.
Right.
They either locked them up or got rid of them. So you had their children, and that's the orphan side of it. But they needed to repopulate for the infrastructure. So people are suggesting, and I'm not suggesting this, but I would like to know where all of these babies came from, that they were cloning.
Mm.
Now, people say that they're doing that today. And obviously, we know they can do it because I think in the late 90s it was that we had Dolly the sheep, and there's
Yes.
not a lot of difference between a sheep and a person. So obviously the technology is there, but when that goes back to, I don't know. Some people would argue it was when we were actually created was the first time it was used, but again, it's too long ago, and it's not something that I'm looking into in particular. So you've got these two parts of the I suppose the issue with the children. You've got the orphans that were left not necessarily homeless because you could be taken away from your mother, or as I was saying earlier on. So a lot of these children were snatched. You've then got children, indigenous tribes in Northern America and Canada. A lot of their children were taken. They were actually physically taken. So they were loved for, they were cared for. The ones that were just living with a single parent, their mother, were being fed. But there were a lot that were homeless. And these were easy pickings. These were, in America, they were called the ragamuffins, and these were starting to terrorize areas. So it was out of control. So they got the children. And it was actually a person called Charles, get his name again, Charles Loring Brace, a Freemason, and they're always philanthropists, decided to actually establish the Orphan Act and started shipping these children from places like New York and shipping them to the Midwest. But this was happening everywhere. This happened all across the world. So it wasn't that the children didn't have anything to eat. Some of
Mm.
them were genuine orphans, as I was saying a second ago. And obviously they would have been in distress. But that wasn't really the issue. The issue was these children had a purpose. With a lot of the adult population gone, who is going to farm the fields and grow the crops? Who is going to get that food chain back up and running again? Well, it's a lot easier to re-educate a child or
And
to
I
give them.
suppose in the beginning of the 1800s, we started to see the church schools coming in.
Absolutely, absolutely, and they played a quite a strong part of the process. And Charles Brace was a Protestant who actually described himself as a racist and a hater of anyone who wasn't Protestant,
Wow.
a high-ranking Freemason. So if you
Yeah.
look at the orphan trains, which is what happened in America, somewhere in the region of 250,000 children were taken from the streets and from single parents in New York alone, and were shipped to the Midwest to work on farms. They were taken on trains called the orphan trains. Ironically, Toy Story 3, the opening sequence features a train that's about to come off the tracks. The tracks have been blown up, and Woody the cowboy is going to save them. This train is full of these weird little creatures. And just as the train comes onto the bridge and they're going to fall, he turns around and says, "The orphans." So this is something that's out there. The orphans were shipped on trains. Now, a lot of these children would have come not just from New York. A lot of these children would have come to New York with their families in search of a new life. And these would have come from the empire that was Great Tartaria. One minute they're speaking their native tongue, the next minute they're shipped off, always outside of Masonic Lodge. They're dressed up and asked to dance and sing, and they're given numbers, forms of identity, and then they're re-educated.
It's very reminiscent, part of that, I mean, not the whole thing, but part of that from the Great Evacuation during the
Yeah,
Second World War, with
absolutely.
labels and boxes, and away you go to the countryside. The parents stay in London to be bombed, and the kids go off into a different world. Many of them, of course, come back. I mean, I read quite a bit of that during, I was writing a book about it, which never got published, or was yet to be published, I should say. And what was fascinating there is many of the kids from the slums of London didn't want to go back because they found with the families in the countryside it was more wholesome. I mean,
Yeah,
some of them were treated abominably by the country
yeah,
people, of course, because there were these townies. But many of them realised that actually, we live in slums in London,
yeah,
and in the countryside there's clean air. There's not that sort of the acrid air from coal burning, all crammed into one little room, which people were. But just that imagery of the trains
yeah.
taking hundreds, thousands of children to different parts, and my dad was one of those, and he remembers it very well. And talking of that, in living memory, I mean, clearly there would be nobody around now. I mean, my dad was born in the 30s. If my granddad was around, he would have been born in the Victorian period. But you would think that there must be accounts from those days that people wrote about their
Yeah.
upbringing and that sort of thing. And on videos in the past, I've met people. I had, so for example, sorry, I'm rambling a bit here, but I had somebody say somebody said to me, why is it there are no gravestones beyond the 1800s in the churchyards? Well, that's
Yeah.
not true. There are plenty of 1600 because I've been round and seen them. I used
Yeah.
to make loads of videos, and I had to correct the person and say, well, actually, there are loads of those. And I've met people, and we've gone to graveyards, and he's traced his family back to the 1600s. So, how do one equate those sort of people if the population was pretty much eradicated? And how come people can, not necessarily using places like Ancestry.com, but doing their own research, find relations that go back before the Great Reset? How do we equate that?
I think that you would struggle to do that in a lot of places. I mean, Ancestry.com that you've mentioned, I've used that myself. And what you find is that once you get to a certain point, there isn't really any information at all. But if you
Right.
take, for example, a graveyard, as you mentioned earlier on, and you go looking for graves, if you think of the population of the area where you live, and you go to each of the cemeteries, always everybody else.
How do you mean?
Well, are there as many gravestones in those churches, in the graveyards and cemeteries, as there were people that have lived there since? If you took the earliest, the most oldest gravestone in the area and
Yes.
calculated the population that lived and died specifically in that town or city, well, where are all the other graves? Because you'd need thousands and thousands of them. So are they stacking them on top of each other? Were we cremating back then? So I think you're always going to have people that can find the history, absolutely.
Yes.
But what I'm talking about specifically are people really that happened after that, and a lot of them can't. So if you follow the story of the orphan trains, and there are quite a few videos and books on it, and YouTube's got a lot of people talking about their experiences or their parents' experiences riding as an orphan on those trains. Um, they were they were snatched or taken. They will not be able to trace their family tree because they were given new identities a lot of the time. So I think Ancestry.com is going to work for a lot of people, but it's not going to work for everybody
Do you
because there
think?
isn't any history.
Right. I just wondered if places like, and this is not to have a go at Ancestry.com, should anybody be watching from there, but I just wondered what these sites, which have become portals now for a lot of people, the sort of lazy man's way of tracing their ancestors, whether they have drawn a line themselves to say there's occulted information that we will not reveal purposely, because they are now where the mass people, if anyone's interested in it, will go. They can make money from that whole interest about what your family lineage is. In the past, historians and people, amateur historians who are interested in things, have gone to the parish records, they've gone to churches and all of that, and found these lists that do go back to 1600. And just to add one thing about stacking people over each other, that did happen.
Yeah.
Because I remember I was filming at a church, and there was a grave digger digging a grave, and I said, "Oh, I thought it was supposed to be 6 foot down." He said, "Well, I can't go any down any further." There were bones. He said, "We had a pile of bones." And he said, "Oh, yeah, these are probably 200-300-year-old bones." I said, "Are you allowed to dig then?" He says, "We've only got so much space, and after so many hundreds of years, we reuse the graves."
Yeah.
So that might suggest where some of the people were, because populations were much fewer, and to have a grave would, just as it is today, is quite expensive, especially having a headstone and all of that. So it would only be the richer people who would have had the graves. The rest of us, God knows what they did with them. Presumably,
exactly, and that's what I found is a stumbling block. What did happen to everybody else? So, for example, if you just take London, there aren't enough cemeteries. Even if you stack them on top of each other, have people got any idea what the population of London is today without Googling it? And then let's go back,
like 6 million or something, isn't it?
Got to be, hasn't it? 6 or 7 million. And let's go back 250 years and add everybody up that died in London. Well, there isn't enough room to put 7 million people today. There's not enough. There aren't enough graves to put 1 million people in them today. So even if we stacked 7 on top of each one, where do they all go? So I appreciate the fact.
Well, we are told about these plague pits.
Yes.
And I did know an author who had written several books about tracing the plague pits around London, and of course many of them now are built on, or they're car parks because it's dodgy ground to build on it because of subsidence and things, or of course it's not a good look if you're putting the foundations of it and you unearth hundreds of bones. But he said that he had found from old maps and old manuscripts and stuff in London these old areas, and he had and there was more than you imagine there would have been of these mass graveyards. And you think, well, was the plague an excuse to get rid of hundreds of thousands of people?
Right. Well, that's actually something that I believe so, and I believe each pandemic or each outbreak that they've had probably has been a cull, a form of population control. I think that's exactly what they are. If you look at the Spanish flu, that claimed the lives of more people than the First World War did. So I think these things happen. But what I'm saying is I can go onto Ancestry.com or somewhere like that, and I can trace my family tree back and I can keep going. But how on earth can I find out if that information is correct? If those people were, my ancestors that far back, were in a mass grave? Where are the parish records for them?
And, so I suppose you're only trusting, I mean, ultimately you're trusting that the records are even correct.
Yeah, which of course would have been put in place by the same people that are doing all the damage today. So
yes,
it's
a lot of work for people, but
yeah. So I think that Ancestry.com might work for some people, but the people that I'm talking about really are the people that were moved from places like Russia, what was Great Tartaria, and shipped around the world. They won't be able to trace anything back. No. They were renamed. Just like an orphan, if you're adopted and you're never told what your real name was, how are you ever going to trace your family tree back? You're going to think that it is the people that have taken you on. Now, those people clearly that adopted you, and back with the orphan trains, you weren't actually adopted. There was no adoption process. You just worked for them and they put you up. There were no paperwork. They weren't legally taking you on as their guardian. So a lot of these people will have the ancestry of the family that told them they were mum and dad. Now,
Do
those
you
people
think?
clearly have been around and go back as far back as you can. They because they weren't part of the problem. They weren't committed. They weren't killed. They
Hmm.
weren't stuck in a prison or locked up in an asylum. These people were playing the game. They
So
will go back.
do you think there's an element here? Just thinking about this, after it's just suddenly occurred to me that by doing this, you're preventing people to have bloodline families, and that only certain families were allowed this clean blood. Whoops, doing it again. This clean bloodline families, like the
Hmm.
Rothschilds and what have you, so that their lineage can be traced and that they know that the same blood effectively has gone through. But if you're resetting and getting rid of a lot of the adults, and then you're giving them children that have been come from somewhere else, you're stopping those that long distance bloodline and mixing things up so that it's impure, as it were.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Well,
That's
thank you.
exactly. And that is what people are saying on the Facebook page. There are a lot of people on there that say that they were found at the bottom of the garden, or they were adopted, or they're talking about their
Well,
grandparents,
and
great
now you say
grandparents.
that, and immediately you think, where do babies come from? The storks bring them.
Yeah, again, old folklore.
Old folklore.
Yeah, so the story with for anyone who doesn't know the
Found at the bottom
stork
of the
story.
garden. The
Yeah,
stork brings the children. And then it's like a shocker when you realise that two adults have to rummage around in a bed at night and get a bit passionate, and
yeah,
and you think, oh, I thought the storks built, and of course that story, as you've said, is kind of what's fed into us in a very folklory way of thinking, and
yeah.
so much of folklore is much more truer than the facts that we're told in school.
Yeah, I mean, the Stork story is an interesting one. Hans Christian Andersen wrote a book about that. And it's actually, again, that's quite dark, where the stork would bring good parents a live baby, and bad parents got delivered a dead one.
Oh, I didn't know that. Blimey.
Yeah, and whole stork thing goes back to um, pagan folklore, if you like, pagan mythology, where people would typically marry on the summer solstice. Storks would conceive around the summer solstice and then and lay their eggs. Sorry, and then they would migrate for the winter, normally to Africa. They would then come back to places like Germany and Russia, back onto the chimney stacks and rooftops, and the babies would hatch in spring. So the storks returning from Africa in spring was a sign that not only because it actually took 9 months for the stork as well, it was a sign that babies were coming. And that's where it came from. The storks are coming back for the babies. They're going to be delivering babies. And that's where the stork thing comes from. But the Hans Christian Andersen book and story, The Stork, is worth a read. We've actually got it here. We've got a very early copy of that. So
And
yeah, that's the stork thing.
and so I suppose when you get to whenever it was that the birth certificate or the
Hmm.
register of a copy of birth starts to come in, as people are perhaps aware that, hang on a minute, we need to keep a register of everybody, give them
Hmm.
a name, Sesta trusts and all of that. We can make money out of the sweat equity of people and bond them and
Mm.
all that business that we know is going on. That I suppose I'm again thinking off the top of my head that as people become inquisitive about who they are, then there is this sort of available information through birth certificates and all of that, just to appease people, that they know,
Hmm.
oh yeah, we've got this register of who was born and who your parents were, blah blah blah, to give
Mm.
the illusion that everything is normal
Hmm.
when it's been manipulated.
Yeah, and obviously, if you go back before the last reset, there weren't birth certificates. There was no
No.
registration. There were no passports.
Well, you didn't have a
Um,
surname. You
yeah,
were,
absolutely. Of the
Richard of
family.
Biggleswick, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
or of the
uh,
family, or your,
yeah,
Carpenter, John Carpenter, or whatever it was.
yeah. So the passports as well, for example, the passport, all of that happened after that last reset in 1776. So we go from literally nothing really happening to everything happening after that, followed by the Industrial Revolution. So, 1776 is when the Illuminati were founded. It's also the year that the United States of America became the United States of America. It's a key year for lots of things happening there. And the Lunacy Act, and again, the same. That's when prisons popped up. Until then, London, for example, only had one orphanage. And over the next 50 to 100 years, opened another 69 of them.
Good God. And so we're running out of time. I can't believe that we've been speaking for an hour already. And so in terms of today, it seems as if we are on the brink of the end of something. And we've been told, as you said, by the WF that there's the Great Reset, that we're ready for another one. And we know that, of course, people have been cajoled, persuaded, propagandized to take something which may not have been a useful thing to take, which we're going to see, they say, many deaths. We've already seen a lot of people who are having reactions from it.
Yeah.
We know that what they're manipulating in the sky is targeting farms.
Yeah.
So starvation is potentially on the card. It doesn't bode well for us. It's somewhat, but and a lot of fear, of course, is created by talking about, and I'm worried at running a YouTube channel talking about this stuff. Am I adding to the fear of the end times? And of course, I get emails all the time from people saying, but we are in end times. It says in Revelations, we're in end times. And you think, oh my God, it's all gloom and doom. Do you feel that's where we are? And if so, is there anything we can do to prevent it in the last few minutes of this show?
I don't think we can stop it happening. I think that what they're doing is they're perhaps rushing things now. More and more things are happening, like the 15-minute cities, 5G, and then we've got 6G coming, the chemtrailing. If people can't spot that now, then we've got a problem, haven't we? And these sort of artificial proxy wars that we have, and so I don't think we can stop it happening. Whatever's going to happen will happen anyway. But I think the difference is this time, the internet and podcasts like this have got the information out there faster. And I think that all we can do is try and wake as many people up as possible. I agree with the guest you had on. I know it was over the phone or a voice conversation rather than face to face or Zoom. Yesterday, the farmer. We are going to run out of food. That is going to happen. You can't keep doing what they're doing and expect corn to grow. And also the cattle are eating the grass that's being rained on with, graphene and aluminium and other nasties in it. We're going to have a huge problem. And I think it will come down to survival of the fittest. I think the tinfoil hat wearers will probably scrape through because, we know what's coming. But I think we're going to lose a lot of people. I really do. And it is a reset. And that is what happens. That is what they do. But I think this time, rather than us having to comply when they reset and start again, we're going to fight.
My only worry,
won't just win.
Well, I hope you're right, of course, and I think we can win. Although every day I do this, there's more doom and gloom in my inbox, and it just makes me want to run away. The problem I see is that we're rushing, or they're making us, and I'm complicit in this, by having things online in a digital format which can be wiped out.
Yes.
And that's why I said people should be writing diaries on paper and taking photographs on film or printing their pictures on paper, because all the time we have this world as it is in digital form, and the more we are convinced to do that and get away, even our music and everything is in a streaming service, the more of that. One big flash from, say, a solar thing or a what's-a-name weapon, and they talk about banking and the blockchain and Bitcoin going online, and you think, hang on a second, the minute you take away coinage and you start having everything digital, we are at the mercy of a magnetic flash, and
Yeah.
everything is erased.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like in a big reset.
Yes. And I think we need to be writing things down. I mean, one thing I started doing when we saw what was coming, we were going to sell all of our old vinyl. Who needs it now? And
Yeah.
we stopped. We stopped. We decided not to. We've kept it. We've got hordes of it.
Yeah.
And books. We have been buying books. We've been going into secondhand bookshops and buying useful books on how to build things, first aid from 150 years ago, and old cookery books and so on. We've been buying more and more books, hence Hans Christian Andersen and a lot of works from Dickens. We've been buying books that we can read stories to our great grandchildren to, because they are sooner or later going to turn this off. And I think people out there that can afford it, now might not be a bad time, even if you can only afford £50 a month or £100 a month, to buy little bits of gold,
Mm.
because we'll end up going back to barter and trade. I'm
Mm.
pretty sure of that. I think it was it Einstein who said, "I don't know what weapons they'll fight World War III with, but I do know World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones."
Gosh.
So yeah, I think we've got
So,
to go back to the old ways.
sobering thought. I don't know how long we've got, but let's hope we've got a little longer. But we've
People
run
keep
out of
telling
time.
me September, but something's going to happen in September, but I don't know what. But if anybody out there wants to share anything with me, do, any information, anything at all, um, or debate me in any way. I'm open to any
Yes.
conversation really.
Well, there we are. When do you think you'll finish the book?
Still August, yeah, and
Still August?
yeah. So still on schedule for August, and I'm now getting people message every day, wanting to be put on a list to pre-order and stuff. And I'm not
Yes.
going to do that. I'll put them on a list, but I'm not looking to take pre-orders from anybody unless I've got it physically in my hand. Then I won't be
Right.
taking anybody's money, that's for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, but still on for August, and I've got an editor, a fellow called Matt Webb, who I work with. He's editing it all for me, and I've got a friend who's actually my best friend, Terry. He's actually going to be getting it published for me, so we're ready to go. I just need to speed up.
Yes. Well, make sure you get it. It'll be a shame if it just hits the shops or is available, and then we have a reset and we're all knocked off and no one gets to read it.
I know, I know.
But
That's yeah.
there we
Hopefully,
are.
hopefully we'll be out there just before that happens.
We will fight. We will fight them on the beaches and in the publishing houses.
Absolutely.
Guy, thank you so much. So many more questions I could have asked. I wanted to sort of ask about spirituality and who we are as in terms of that sort of thing. But we've gone over the hour now, so we may have to get you back again when you've done a bit more writing and more research to find out. But I'd be interested in people's comments. Of course, do put them in. Shall I put your Facebook page in the description?
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
can email me. By all means. I get a lot of information, but I'll certainly try and reply to anybody that
Fantastic.
contacts me, even if they just want to comment on the fact I'm wearing Bluetooth headphones,
Yes.
earphones. Yeah, I have to do that because I'm using an iPad Pro and it's plugged in and charged and only has one socket. So I never wear them apart from doing this. So I'm
Oh,
fully
so
aware, but
I apologise for radiating your brain then.
it's a small price to pay to be on again, Richard.
Oh, that's very generous of you. Well, thank you so much, Guy, for coming on. I will leave all the links in the description. We have run out of time, unfortunately, but let's hope we haven't run out of time in the bigger picture. But until then, take care. Thank you so much for joining me. Really appreciated it. Don't have nightmares, ladies and gentlemen. You never know. We may have got another 100 years. But we'll see.
Yeah.
Let's just get through the next day. That would be a good thing. Anyway, until next time, I'll be back with more monologues and more wonderful guests. Until then, from Guy and I, thanks for watching. Take care. Look after yourselves. Write down stuff on bits of paper. Put them in some big plastic box and bury them somewhere so that if something happens, your house burns down or whatever, some future person will know what we've gone through. That would be a good idea. Till next time, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.